Welcome to the Fast Food Legend podcast. My name is Sam, and every week I will be sharing with you my latest essays about fast food. There is a brief silence between each essay. If you like my podcast, please subscribe, like, and most importantly, share it with someone else you think would like it. Thank you for your continued support of my work. Here is today's episode. There's something quietly devastating about the arrival of Zaxby's new giant quesadillas. They're marketed as loud and celebratory, an overstuffed ode to Big Americana, crispy chicken fingers, that's fingers with a Z, molten cheddar, the sanctified smear of ranch. But beyond the fanfare, beneath the corporate shout of bigger is better, lurks the soft ache of a culture that confuses abundance with satisfaction and indulgence with intimacy. The press release insists on stacked bravado, ultimate indulgence, giant portion, craveable twist, each phrase capitalized like it's pleading to matter. Yet in the LED vintage-style light-bulbed hush of the dining room, somewhere between the first euphoric bite and the inevitable collapse of structural integrity, which begs the question, why hasn't Zaxby's engineered a better quesadilla envelope? This bombast gives way to something quieter, more familiar. The cheese pull of regret, a sliver of onion sticking out like a memory you didn't know still hurt. It's not just about Zaxby's new giant quesadillas. It's about how we eat when we feel unseen. There is a specific emotional resonance to these limited time offerings, released just as the pollen count spikes and half the country collectively wheezes into their antihistamines. Allergies feel like the body grieving in slow motion. You're tired but can't sleep, hungry but detached from taste. In this state, the Zaxby's chicken fajita giant quesadilla, packed with 3 hand-breaded chicken fingers, cheddar jack cheese, grilled onions and peppers, and Southwest ranch on a flour tortilla, isn't food. It's balm, warmth, a handheld hallucination of being cared for. And then you remember, you're alone. You were always alone. The ranch is cold. This release coincides cruelly with that yearly emotional thaw, the season when people emerge, evolve, succeed without you. They get married, write novels, go off SSRIs. Meanwhile, you're bedrotting with The Cure's Disintegration on loop, their lyrics wrapping around your scrolling thumb like gauze. I never said I would stay to the end. Robert Smith understands what a quesadilla cannot, how permanence is a myth and excess often a mask for abandonment. The quesadillas themselves echo this sentiment. Overloaded to the point of dysfunction, they can't hold themselves together. Neither can you. Each bite becomes a negotiation, desire versus dignity, heat versus hand coordination. The act of eating them alone in your car, ranch pooling on your jeans, is strangely theatrical, like a failed Beckett character, waiting for a drip that never lands where you want it. There's also the galling reality that the people we imagine watching us aren't watching at all. The one who left. They don't care that you're posting stories of faux joyful solo bites, captioned, "better off," like a lie you've told enough to believe. The performative resilience of public consumption, this idea that overindulgence signals healing, falls flat without an audience. And social media, ever the mirror ball of discontent, reflects only the curated joys of others. You scroll, chew, swallow, repeat. In Ways of Seeing, John Berger wrote, "We never look at just one thing. We are always looking at the relation between things and ourselves. The Zaxby's giant quesadilla is not just a sandwich. It's a relationship barometer, a crisis object, a diary entry wrapped in foil. If this is food as art, and perhaps it is, it belongs in the lineage of modern melancholia, alongside Tracy Amin's Unmade Bed, or Sophie Calais' Forensic Heartbreaks. The quesadilla, in its failed architecture and desperate grandeur, performs the absurdity of trying to fill a void that isn't physical. And like those works, it doesn't resolve. It just lingers, unsure of its own purpose. Tucked within the antiseptic fluorescence of a racetrack, past the Red Bull refrigerator and motor oil rack, Swirl World blossoms in a burst of sherbet optimism. This is no ordinary dessert station. It's a self-contained environment, an immersive consumer diorama in which 41 toppings await your arrival like actors in a silent play. Above it all hangs a soothing banner, frozen treats, set in Egyptian slate regular. The choice of Egyptian slate is more than a matter of legibility. It's a conceptual anchor. Designed by Rod MacDonald, this humanist slab serif tempers corporate communication with a hint of warmth, the typographic equivalent of a reassuring nod. The font's soft square structure and horizontal balance promise reliability, with just enough flair to feel personal. It's no accident. This is the typographic voice of engineered hospitality. That calibrated friendliness mirrors the space's visual strategy: pastel spirals, anthropomorphic yogurt cups, and plexiglass rails leading you through a rigid dance of apparent agency. You make your own? Yes. But the toppings are portioned, the swirl velocity fixed. This illusion of spontaneity recalls Troy, Montesquieu's interrogation of structure and freedom, where aesthetics double as constraint. The architecture here stages a frictionless flow, but the most telling detail is the topping bar, its brushed metal lids flipped open like a ritual. It echoes the visual language of Talia Lubinsky, whose installations isolate utilitarian objects to reveal their latent sculptural power. In Swirl World, each spoon and bin is part of a systematized grammar of delight, rendered in food-safe plastic. Egyptian slate's presence above all of this injects an additional layer of calm enforcement. It doesn't shout, but it doesn't whisper either. It gives permission. It reassures. It reifies the space's central contradiction, that individuality must be expressed within prefabricated templates, that freedom is best experienced under light supervision. Below, the machines buzz in fixed intervals. Their arrangement, 6 across, could be mistaken for a minimalist sculpture by Kyle Thurman, whose interest in institutional repetitions and effectless utility finds echoes here. The yogurt is neutral, the choice is many, but the path through it is clear. What emerges is not merely an aesthetic experience, but a behavioral one. You move, you swirl, you top, you pay. The serif signage does not disrupt this flow, it sanctions it. Egyptian slate becomes the bureaucrat of desire, organizing sugar into sentences, rituals into systems. Swirl World is less about frozen yogurt than it is about the architecture of benign manipulation. It is pleasure by way of signage. And in that sense, Egyptian slate is doing exactly what it was meant to do: make you feel like you chose it. In Summer Bliss, Starbucks performs an unexpected summer ballet in the vernacular of corporate seasonal affect. The image, a clean, stylized composition of 4 hyper-real blended beverages, reverberates with a soft commercial luminosity reminiscent of Hans-Peter Reinecke's mid-70s East German food package studies, where ideology simmered quietly under the gloss of abundance. Here, too, abundance is mood, not message. Each drink, upright and totemic, recalls the sculptural optimism of Nella Frankel's proto-minimalist wax columns, while the backdrop, a gentle, digitally diffused green field, evokes those pastoral airbrushed gradients used by Bauhaus-affiliated designer Friedel Dicker in her lesser-known textile mock-ups. The image eschews irony in favor of total sincerity, suggesting that sincerity itself has become a style of irony. Let's start with the firework frappuccino, which channels a kind of neo-formalist agit pop. Its explosive red tapioca spheres disrupt the placid blue liquid in a manner not dissimilar to Réjean Dupont's 1968 pigment and resin sculptures, where embedded forms threaten to dislodge their surrounding materials. It's a drink that performs rupture, a rare feat in an advertisement. Beside it, the brown sugar strato frappuccino courts a more conservative aesthetic, The swirling of its beige tones is not unlike the layered gypsum glazes used by Brazilian conceptualist Tarsila do Albornoz in her short-lived Sweet Strata series, 1973 to 1975, now mostly lost save for a few catalog references. The coffee drink here is a study in market-oriented baroqueness, sweet, inviting, and ultimately depthless. The strawberry matcha strato frappuccino stands as the most structurally legible of the group, its duochromatic split presenting a binary too perfect to be accidental. There is something disconcertingly clear in its logic, much like the split compositions of Algerian printmaker Samir Moulay Bachir, who insisted that division is the only truth capital cannot digest. The pink crown atop the vegetal green feels distinctly performative, a headpiece for a drink that knows it's being watched. Lastly, the salted caramel mocha strato trademark frappuccino registered acts as an anchor, its caramel drizzle a controlled gesture that one could easily mistake for a brushstroke from the obscure Neo-Gothenburg school painter Agnete Lorck. There is a dark solidity here, almost reactionary in its refusal to innovate, but also oddly comforting. This is the drink as gesture, as commodity, as symbol. What's perhaps most unsettling about Summer Bliss is its completeness. The image leaves no visual air unpurified by its branding. Its aesthetic grammar is so airtight that one cannot imagine anything off-screen. It is a closed system, a mirror turned inward. In this, Starbucks has, perhaps unintentionally, echoed the logic of certain late 20th century art collectives, like Gruppe 27 bis in East Vienna, who postulated that the most radical gesture was to aestheticize what cannot be consumed. This is not a campaign, it's a fresco in syrup and stabilizer. We are being sold not drinks, but symbols of chill, control, and infinite reproducibility. Summer bliss indeed. And yet, like all good summer dreams, it dissolves on the tongue. This Cheesy Bites pizza with ranch lover's flight from Pizza Hut feels like a discarded storyboard panel from an Armin Aloyan painting. Garish, compulsively detailed, and tuned to a frequency of absurdity just high enough to disguise its melancholy. Aloyan's figures, often disfigured cartoons frozen in the thick sludge of oil paint, linger in stasis, their movements arrested in moments of existential confusion. Likewise, this pizza is all edges and excess, a circular arena lined with grotesquely knotted mozzarella grenades, each one oozing like an overstated punctuation mark around the perimeter of mediocrity. The pepperoni lies suspended in a thick sheet of melted cheese like a deranged smile, aggressive, performative, overconfident. Elian's Daily Strips or Green Grass series deploy similar tactics, dense, splattered compositions teetering between humor and horror, the line between figuration and collapse barely maintained. This pizza, with its 28 dunks and its triptych of ranches, chipotle, pepperoni, ultimate, mimics that same formal pressure. It doesn't ask to be eaten, it demands to be reckoned with. The pizza's formal ambition, 8 slices, 28 cheese-stuffed knots, 3 dipping sauces, is theatrical. Like Aloyan's work, it leverages scale and repetition to dizzying effect. But there's a clumsiness too, an inherent awkwardness. The bites are not equidistant, their seams ooze inconsistently. The ranch cups feel less like accompaniments than audience members to the pizza's spiraling performance. In A While Ago the Elephant Ordered the Ants to Make Him a Burger, Aloyan orchestrates a farcical hierarchy with tragic undertones. This pie performs a similar joke on itself. It's a pizza pretending to be a flight, a sampler pretending to be a meal, a novelty trying to pass for necessity. And like Elian's cartoon animals or lumpy humanoid forms, the Cheesy Bites pizza is expressionless yet emotionally charged. It wants to please you, desperately, grotesquely so. But in doing so, it reveals something plaintive, an anxiety of irrelevance, a dread of being eaten and forgotten. Underneath the Parmesan dusting and the pre-flavored ranch flights, there's an emptiness not unlike Aloyan's abandoned rooms and slackened bodies. It's all for show, and the show is barely holding itself together. In the end, to eat this pizza is to enter into an unspoken contract with the ridiculous. To surrender to its circular logic is to feel both triumphant and slightly ashamed. Aloyan would understand. A Rally's paper bag, creased, oil-blotched, and improbably theatrical, recently emerged as an object of unexpected semiotic density. Its slogan, "These flavors never sleep," pulses not merely with marketing energy, but with a kind of vernacular mysticism. Flavor is movement, as temporal continuity, as effective labor. Graphically, the design splays out like a roadside codex. Checkerboards, vectorized lips, a cartoon car on an infinite drive, each element flirting with chaos yet suspended in a pre-programmed balance. This is the ghost of Carlo Maria Mariani's neoclassical kitsch, filtered through the vinyl-choked arteries of Americana. There's a carnivalesque precision here, akin to the collage textile schemes of Alighiero Boetti, or even the diagrammatic whimsy of Goran Terboljak's meta-advertising strategies. That this is a Rally's bag is no small detail. The chain's brand, rooted in the aesthetics of drive-thrus, neon nostalgia, and regional swagger, becomes a curatorial frame in itself. Unlike the sanitized minimalism of global fast food giants, Rally's leans into its visual maximalism with Baroque flair. The bag doesn't whisper. It shouts through a mouthful of fries. Beneath its surface, however, lies a more chilling conceit. The imperative "never sleep" situates the consumer within a broader topology of acceleration and overconsumption. It channels the ethos of Jacek Tylicki's "give if you can, take if you have to" interventions, where transactional aesthetics mask moral ambiguity. This is consumption as devotional act, a roadside Eucharist performed beneath the fluorescence of a service window. Indeed, in the postmodern continuum that David Hopkins maps in after-modern art, objects like this Rally's bag cease to function as mere waste. They are active participants in the culture they reflect: image, rhetoric, ritual. Like the late works of Anna Opperman, the bag stages a narrative not about food, but about appetite, perpetual, disembodied, and performative. What we're left with is a disposable icon, as transient as a Tuesday combo, but as loaded with meaning as any museum wall text. In its folds, grease, and giddy visual noise, we hear the whispered refrain of the American sublime, consumption without rest. In a fluorescent-lit corner of a McDonald's dining room, flanked by the hum of frozen drink machines and the muffled ping of fry timers, a hand-assembled trifold display proclaims, "Let's get digital." This temporary craft-forward installation invites diners not to contemplate, but to download. What begins as a cheerleader chant for techno-participation, complete with glitter-cut arrows and QR codes, quickly unfolds into something stranger, more poetic. A vernacular abstraction of digital capitalism, rendered in the palette of processed food. The structure is grade school science fair, yet its ambition is metaphysical. A primary color riot of yellows, blacks, reds, and McCafe browns collide in abrupt geometric diagonals, suggesting motion, friction, and segmentation, a kind of graphic afterimage of Kei Imazu's digitally overgrown surfaces, where flatness becomes a portal into fractured systems. Here, instead of mythological hybrids or botanical mutations, we find cones of soft serve and boxes of fries, beckoning like sacred relics in a gamified religion. Each panel in the triptych operates with its own logic. The central panel, dominated by the phrase "Download the app today," is flanked by QR codes, glyphs of participation, each implying a deferred transaction. The typography, aggressively hand-cut, glued with visible craft foam, reanimates the gesture of Elizabeth Zvonar's collage techniques, where mass-produced language is reclaimed as effective form. This is signage as seance, calling the spirit of the brand into the everyday. To the right, a vertical diagram outlines the steps of this ritual: sign up, earn, redeem. The sequence resembles a votive offering more than a process. Points are earned, identities formed, coffee reified. This linear cascade echoes Jackie Nickerson's parsing of labor and gesture. Only here, the labor is performed not by a worker, but by the app user, digitally loyal and endlessly tracked. What's radical, though, is how much this installation wants. Not just your download or your data, but your participation in a story of reward. The entire structure is staged as seduction, and that seduction is paper thin. A literal piece of foam tape separates the image of a McFlurry from the slick QR portal that promises its free acquisition. You are always one scan away from satisfaction, and always scanning. The table it rests on is draped in what looks like a repurposed banquet cloth. White, floral, almost bridal. It's an altar, a communion. A cheap table becomes sacred ground for the contract between customer and platform. In this light, the piece recalls Mary Ann Peters' installations, where domesticity and desire are compressed into symbolic material, though here desire is pure, fry-shaped and algorithmically administered. And yet, beneath the cheer, a quiet terror. The phrase, "let's get digital," borrowed from pop lyricism and 1980s optimism, lands like a glitchy echo. What does it mean to get digital now, when we already are? The sign is not beckoning a future, it is mourning the analog, burying it under an avalanche of pixelated fries. Let's Get Digital is not just a call to action, it is a mirror held up to our consumer condition, asking not, will you participate, but how many points until you feel full? In the synthetic glow of RGB LEDs and digital detritus, the fast food chain Jack in the Box has launched its most recent conceptual foray, a collaborative munchie meal designed by Grammy-winning artist and polymath T-Pain. This limited-time offering, an edible artifact that lives simultaneously in the drive-thru and the metaverse, pushes the boundary of celebrity branding into the realm of participatory installation. The T-Pain Munchie Meal is as much performance as product. Offered nationwide and virtually embedded into Fortnite's new Jack Zone Wars map, the meal includes a choice between the Burg R Tater or Chicken Tater Melt, both absurdist, hybrid architectures of croissant buns, cheese strata, and fried protein, a lone taco, curly fries, a stuffed cookie, and an air freshener, a fragrant ready-made. Each item is imbued with gamified symbolism. The taco heals, the cookie speeds, the melt empowers. This is edible narrative design. Jack's latex-headed mascot, a surrealist cipher wearing a suit and headphones, appears alongside T-Pain in promotional materials that recall the flattened pop surrealism of Takashi Murakami's commercial crossovers. With a soda cup modeled like cut crystal and slick plasticine food styling, the mise-en-scène speaks fluent vaporwave, ironic nostalgia dialed into TikTok temporality. Here, consumption functions on multiple registers. On the one hand, we have the literal, late-night fast food engineered for sensory overload and maximum dopamine. On the other, we're presented with a cultural consumption of identity. T-Pain, the once auto-tuned avatar of mid-2000s digital excess, now recodes himself as a patron saint of nocturnal creativity, gamers and snackers alike. Like the artists of the 1980s East Village scene who turned persona into product, see Basquiat, Herring, T-Pain traffics in multiplicity, collapsing musician, streamer, and food curator into a single branded entity. This act of edible conceptualism owes debts to pop art and beyond. It's not hard to imagine the shade of Warhol smirking in the neon-lit distance, recalling his claim that the most beautiful thing in Tokyo is McDonald's. But where Warhol rendered commodity as subject, this project renders commodity as environment. As the artist avatar T-Pain transmutes from cultural producer to Fortnite power-up, The meal itself becomes a kind of relational aesthetics. It is not viewed, it is eaten, it is played. Yet despite all its neon gloss and metaverse integration, this work is also a haunting reminder of late capitalism's culinary uncanny. The food is simulacral, engineered to appear more real than real, its hyper-saturated hues and exaggerated textures more CGI than edible. As with Hito styles, poor images, the fidelity is less in the taste than in the format. Digestible, meme-ready, screen-transmissible. To consume the T-Pain Munchie meal is to participate in a ritual of mediated hunger, where the line between desire, branding, and play is not only blurred, but actively erased. This is fast food as performance art, merchandising as world building. In a cultural moment defined by collapsing boundaries between avatar and person, snack and symbol, game and gallery, Jack and T-Pain have not so much fed us as installed us. In a landscape increasingly defined by algorithmic suggestion and accelerated consumption, the Dunkin' Donuts interior provides an unexpectedly rich site of aesthetic contemplation. This particular iteration, clean, unpopulated, and awash in the fluorescence of ceiling-mounted grids, operates less as a cafe than as a devotional chamber, organized around a theology of caffeine and sugar. The ceiling, that relentless grid of drop tiles and recessed light, is punctuated by an exquisite sculptural intervention, hanging forms that double as both light fixtures and signifiers, donut-shaped pendant lamps. Rendered in muted orange and strawberry glazed tones, they are objects of symbolic excess and practical purpose. Their repetition recalls the modular logic of Ruth Lasky's weavings, handmade systems of form and repetition that transform the grid into poetry. But where Lasky works with loom and thread, Dunkin' works with high-density foam, plastic, and soft lighting to produce a softened, edible brutalism. Below, the faux stone floor tiles, patterned to resemble something geologic, resist narrative. They speak in the hushed tones of standardization, as if to say, this space is anywhere, therefore it is everywhere. Their deadpan neutrality channels the sensibility of Amitesh Srivastava, whose video works often explore the emotional dead zones of contemporary built environments. The tiles hold no opinion, they simply endure. Along the back wall, a triptych photograph of iced coffee being poured over whipped cream and ringed by donuts suggests an altar. The composition is precise, almost devotional. That the image bears a plastic sheen and probably cost $29.99 to produce only enhances its resonance. One thinks of Sarah Zapata, who imbues synthetic materials with unexpected spiritual weight. In this Dunkin' image, the drip of chocolate syrup functions like a sacred libation. Meanwhile, the vinyl wall text, featuring words like indulge, aroma, latte, and fresh in various fonts and earth tones, suggests a failed utopia of marketing semiotics. This cascade of flavor words, untethered from their reference, becomes a kind of text-based installation a la Eva Bartow, whose interest in value systems and linguistic overcoding finds an echo here in the corporate word cloud that promises everything and means nothing. Perhaps most compelling is the spatial choreography. The booths, low-walled and upholstered in orange and brown, are not designed for comfort, but for brief occupation. They are dwellings for time spent waiting. Time here is not past, it is processed. The man in the back, head bowed over his phone, becomes an unintentional performer in this staging. His presence animates the installation. Like in Jared Buckheister's figurative work, often populated by lone men in liminal spaces, this figure evokes longing, containment, and a kind of quiet queerness embedded in the choreography of public solitude. If fast food is America's most ubiquitous cultural export, then Dunkin', with its donut lamps and devotional beige, is its most sincere architectural poem. This space is not ironic. It is earnest. It wants you to sit, to sip, to enjoy the hum of HVAC and the amber glow of processed hospitality. It's an installation that doesn't know it's art, and perhaps that's what makes it so affecting. Stuck to a refrigerator door in a Wawa somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, the C4 by Jolly Rancher promotional poster doesn't whisper its intentions. It blasts them like a discount air horn at a suburban high school pep rally. But beneath the seizure-bright yellow and market-tested typography lies a more telling expression of late capitalist surrealism, echoing the overlooked aesthetics of minor Fluxist agitprop and early 2000 rave flyers. The poster's central conceit, an energy drink conflanked by its sugar-drenched candy avatars, is not unlike the practice of Dora Maurer, whose sequence-based abstractions probed systemic chaos with informal repetition. Here, repetition is the product itself, the duplication of aesthetic signals, branding, flavor, speed, that collapse into a flattened, effective space. This is not advertisement as art, but art masquerading as advertisement, as if an Andre Kader bar had been dipped in synthetic dye and handed out at a monster truck rally. There's a compelling grotesquerie to the product imagery. The cans, wrapped in loud overlays of branding and neon, have the kind of hyper-reality Jean Baudrillard would have ordered with a side of irony. But more apt might be the work of Marion S. Marion, whose grotesque figuration could be glimpsed in the anthropomorphic undertones of the green apple can, its pose oddly hunched, as though burdened by the weight of its own aggressive marketing. The slogan, "Drop it low and unwrap C4 energy," conjures not just a faux hip vernacular, but an uncanny overlap between bodily exertion and consumer unwrapping. One might think of Yaroslav Serpan's decaying texture hybrids, where words and materiality blur. This is performance energy as striptease, as transformation, as cultural ephemera designed to be consumed in a single glance and metabolized by caffeine in under 20 minutes. To review this as an artwork is, admittedly, to play into its hands. The poster doesn't seek critique, it seeks conversion. But in its synthetic saturation, its jubilant aggression, it inadvertently provides a contemporary ready-made, an involuntary entry in the lineage of parasitic image culture, where everything shouts and nothing stays. In a recent advertisement announcing its How to Train Your Dragon-themed menu, Burger King launches a campaign where fast food collides with fantasy, nostalgia, and cinematic tie-in culture. Set against a digitally composited cliffscape lit by golden hour hues, the ad is not merely a promotional vehicle. It is a mise-en-scène where the aesthetics of animated mythology are consumed, quite literally, by the logic of late capitalist branding. Dominated by a monolithic headline, "A legendary new menu has landed at BK," the ad positions its offerings not just as edible commodities, but as narrative artifacts. A flaming orange burger bun, its chromatic intensity derived, we are told, from natural spice and vegetables, becomes an edible relic, visually echoing both volcanic terrain and the playful menace of toothless, DreamWorks' most domesticated dragon. Accompanying this is a phalanx of sugar-laden avatars, the soaring strawberry lemonade, fiery dragon mozzarella fries, and Vikings chocolate sundae. Together, these items form a tableau of cartoon excess, where visual design trumps dietary substance. What makes this ad noteworthy, beyond its aesthetic maximalism, is its fusion of visual culture and edible branding. The dragon motif, long a symbol of fear, chaos, or Eastern transcendence, is here rebranded as child-safe, Instagram-ready ephemera. There is a Bactinian carnival at play. Dragons no longer hoard gold. They serve it up as gooey mozzarella sticks. It's a semiotic collapse wherein myth becomes mascot, and the sacred is digested via drive-through. More significantly, this advertisement belongs to a lineage of corporate fantasy collaborations that blur the line between narrative immersion and consumption. It recalls the strategies of Jeff Koons, where surface, whimsy, and childhood nostalgia coalesce in an unapologetic celebration of kitsch. Yet unlike Koons, who invites critical distance, Burger King offers no such rupture. Irony is absent. This is branding as mythopoeia, family-friendly, edible enchantment with no aftertaste of critique. Still, one must marvel at the image's sheer visual orchestration. The characters are not merely referenced, but seamlessly integrated. Toothless becomes the packaging, the flight path of the dragon echoes the banner's visual hierarchy, and the burger itself takes on the palette of a volcanic eruption. It's effective branding at its most distilled, the pleasure of recognition entwined with the immediacy of taste. Ultimately, Burger King's Dragon ad exemplifies what Frederick Jameson might call the cultural logic of late capitalism. It transforms affect into appetite and narrative into novelty. If dragons once signified peril and possibility, they are now, like everything else, flame-grilled. In a Reddit post on RT's Burger King, a user recounts an encounter with a carton of fries so offensive in odor, so distinctly redolent of urine, that it compelled not only revulsion, but an investigation into the phenomenology of consumption itself. What begins as a fast food horror story unfolds with the rhythm and intimacy of a confessional essay. At first, the fries seemed merely subpar, then disturbingly off, and finally, unmistakably, abject. The user was brought to a hard stop. The kind of psychic jolt that reminds us our trust in the ordinary, corporate consistency, familiar flavors, the safety of the edible, is a fragile contract. In its strange, effective immediacy, this anonymous complaint recalls the visual provocations of David Hockney, not because Hockney traffics in disgust, he doesn't, but because he too is a master of seducing the viewer with the familiar, only to gradually warp it. The echo lies not in subject matter, but in structure, the confrontation with surface, the rupture of perception, and the layering of time and point of view. Hockney's A Bigger Splash, 1967, offers a pristine Los Angeles swimming pool, a tableau of modern leisure. Yet the eponymous splash, frozen midair, undoes the tranquility, suggesting both an unseen body and an unseen narrative. Likewise, the Reddit fry eater is left with an unseen presence. What produced the stench? Why did it happen? And why does the moment feel at once grotesque and inexplicably resonant? Both the painting and the post suspend time and certainty. Both turn static surfaces into narrative mysteries. Consider Hockney's later photographic collages, his joiners, where hundreds of snapshots fracture a single space. They are cubist in method, documentary in tone, but surreal in result. They expand the instant into a panorama of durations. In Pear Blossom Highway, 11 to 18 April 1986, number 2, the road is less a place than a disorientation. Likewise, the Reddit post breaks time. It begins as casual reflection, then slides into a sensory hallucination, then lands somewhere between existential horror and forensic report. The smell, described as that of a hot day behind a bar, becomes a spatially textured memory, almost painterly in its layering. And like Hockney, the Reddit user is obsessively representational. They give us textures, soggy, emotions, gut-wrenching, and even comparisons to other foods, dry fries like McDonald's versus the best fries, fresh and crisp. The drama lies in the detail. If Hockney once said that photography freezes time too violently, preferring to layer perception across multiple images, the Reddit post does something similar. It recalls the event in waves, rephotographed by memory, slowly uncovering horror through narrative recursion. Hockney's best work often asks, what do we fail to see when we think we're seeing clearly? In this way, the urine fry post is unexpectedly Hockney-esque. It stages the collision of pleasure and revulsion, of the ordinary made uncanny. It forces a reckoning with representation itself. What does it mean to describe a smell so vividly that it becomes an image? What does it mean to taste something so wrong that it becomes realer than hunger? There is also, in both Hockney and the post, a gently damning critique of surface gloss. Hockney's California is not utopia. It is sun-bleached theater. And Burger King, that temple of fast food standardization, is revealed here not as a purveyor of comfort, but as a site of olfactory betrayal. The brand becomes estranged from itself. A rupture occurs. Something leaks through. This is not to valorize the vulgar or to elevate Reddit into art history, but rather to acknowledge the porousness of contemporary aesthetic experience. In a time when corporate iconography governs our inner lives, a bad fry can be a moment of disillusionment as profound as a gallery wall. And that perhaps is the ultimate Hockney move, to suggest that perception itself is always at risk, always performative, always partial. Whether it's a Yorkshire hedgerow rendered on an iPad or a putrid scent described in digital prose, the invitation is the same: look again, smell again, tell it slant. The space is almost too clean. A Burger King, brightly illuminated and clinically symmetrical, lies open and empty. There is no food visible, no people, no motion, only the inert promise of consumption and the architectural afterglow of a decision someone hasn't made yet. It is a rendering come to life. This fast food dining room does not beg for critique so much as whisper it. The geometry is precise, the palette predictably on brand, warm wood grain veneers, mustard-toned vinyl cushions, and that quietly oppressive orange, mid-century optimism rinsed of memory. Above it all, a suspended canopy of neon-lined panels radiates outward like a bureaucratic sunburst. Their stylized abstraction evokes celebration, but delivers only surveillance. If the Roy Rogers marquee said now, this Burger King says still. There's a material rigor here that recalls Have Karaman's subtle manipulations of surface and pattern. Only here, the motifs aren't painted, they're specced by franchise design systems and implemented at scale. The effect is no less controlled. The chairs with their cartoonish plywood backs and powder-coated legs evoke the functional absurdity of Shannon Boole's domestic interventions. Beautiful, but not quite usable. Their stackable shape anticipates absence. This space is meant to host appetite, but more precisely, it performs a simulation of hosting. In its sterility, it aligns with Rose B. Simpson's sculptural inquiries into identity and infrastructure, except here, the self has been scrubbed entirely from the environment. What remains is procedural. Lights, tables, tiles, all calibrated to enforce flow without friction. And yet friction is everywhere. The harsh ceiling LEDs glare like an interrogation chamber. The LED canopy, a cynical riff on the brand's flame-grilled origin myth, casts no heat. It glows with the cold logic of false nostalgia. You are not having it your way. You are sitting in a high-end simulation of choice, optimized to delay your recognition of its limits. It's tempting to compare this space to the utopian minimalism of Donald Judd or the quiet phenomenology of a Dan Flavin installation, but that would grant it too much poetry. Instead, it feels closer in spirit to Mary Ann Peters's spatialized critiques of institutional opacity, rooms that appear open, inviting, and yet conceal their function behind a curtain of design. At Burger King, the curtain is laminated. The hospitality is transaction-based. The flame is metaphor only. This is not a place to eat. It is a place to wait while eating. A holding cell for calorie logistics. A capsule of muted sound and smooth edges, polished to the point of personality loss. The counter screens flicker with sandwich simulations. The chairs wait like underpaid extras. One can imagine Carlos Vega, again, layering thin washes of consumerist iconography over this scene until it chokes on its own repetition. Or Alina Tensor, warping its edges into a loop of sculptural repetition and labor. But this space resists transformation. It is designed to be static, efficient, frictionless. It dares you to feel anything. And in that dare, it accidentally opens up something real. A sense of modern estrangement so deep it has been tiled over in neutral gray. In a year where branded AR filters and cereal box NFTs feel passé, Jack in the Box and T-Pain have delivered something far more sensorial, specific, and absurd, an air freshener packaged inside a late-night combo meal. It's as if Dieter Roth had a stint at Whedon plus Kennedy. Nestled between curly fries and a stuffed cookie, this item doesn't just punctuate the meal, it elevates the entire experience into a kind of edible Gesamtkunstwerk. The T-Pain air freshener, lavender-hued, caricatured, infused with the anonymous scent of synthetic freshness, hovers between merchandise and mock relic. It calls to mind the olfactory provocations of Clara Ursity's scent-based installations or the deliberately abject perfumery of Christophe Laudamiel. But while Ursity's work explores body, memory, and gender, Jack's version trades in nostalgia and iconography, a cutout of T-Pain as wizard DJ demigod, swinging from your rearview mirror like a votive. Its absurdity is its essence. What could be more surreal than scenting your car with a cartoon version of your dinner's curator? This is not merch. This is a Duchampian ready-made by way of the drive-thru, closer to the hand-packaged absurdities of David Shrigley or the faux utilitarian gestures of Martin Kippenberger than it is to any commercial collectible. That it's bundled with curly fries only deepens its ludicrous conceptual purity. Like Laure Provost's immersive installations, filled with nonsensical signage and misplaced domesticity, the T-Pain Munchie meal invites us to question where the artwork begins and ends. Is the air freshener the object, or is the entire meal an extended performance? The answer seems to lie in the sensory triangulation: taste, smell, and play, via Fortnite integration. In this sense, it aligns uncannily with the synesthetic, time-based pieces of Anika Yi, whose biopolitics of the senses haunt even this flattened, mass-market version. But this freshener is no critique. It is fully complicit, aware, and proudly so. This is the logic of Sylvie Fleury's shopping bags, taken to a fast food extreme, where irony has been so thoroughly digested by capital that it now smells like citrus musk and hangs from your dashboard. And as an object, it's all contradiction. Ephemeral yet collectible, flat yet dimensional, devotional yet disposable. It leaves behind no art historical residue, only a lingering scent and a vague recollection of fries and digital myth-making, which may be exactly the point. In 2025, nothing is sacred except the branded aura, and this air freshener is its tiny, fragrant monument. In the saturated quiet of an American roadside, a corporate banner fastened to a brick wall delivers a contradiction in Helvetica. 24-hour drive-through. It reads, boldly, without irony, before undercutting itself with a lowercase sigh, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Time here is not universal, but contingent. The illusion of ceaseless access evaporates mid-sentence, revealing a more insidious truth. Permanence, in late capitalism, is always conditional. Designed in Neue Helvetica Pro 67 condensed medium, the banner's typography offers no resistance to meaning. Helvetica, as type theorist Ellen Lupton once noted, has no skeleton. It is less a font than a formatting device for authority itself. The 67 condensed weight in particular is exquisitely unopinionated, not decorative, not brutal, not expressive. It is clarity weaponized. In this instance, that clarity becomes a kind of bait and switch, offering round-the-clock comfort that is, in fact, only selectively available. The sign says always, but the asterisk is built into the design, and this is where its quiet profundity emerges. The banner does not simply advertise food, it offers temporal choreography, an invitation to reimagine your sense of time not as continuous, but as modular, monetized, and pre-approved for the weekend. It's a spatial intervention, yes, but also a calendarized hallucination of continuity. You can come any time, as long as that any time falls between dusk on Thursday and 11:59 p.m. Saturday. Its placement, centered above two hedges clipped into near-perfect cubes, accentuates the pretense of order. The hedges are sculptural, submissive. Their geometry echoes the sign's own strict rectilinear framing, reinforcing the fantasy of control. Even the yellow background, just off from caution tape brightness, hums with passive urgency. In another context, it might suggest warmth. Here, it suggests protocol. The small icon of a crescent moon and stars, tucked in the upper right corner like an emoji from a lapsed dream, functions as a tonal undercut, gesturing toward a more ambient temporality. It's kitsch, yes, but it also reveals the surreal condition of nighttime in consumer space. Dream as service window, sleep as deferred labor. One is reminded of Robert Smithson's remark that the suburbs exist without a rational past and without the big events of history. This banner, humble as it may seem, performs precisely that historylessness, an architecture of repetition, offering no event but consumption itself. Yet for all its banality, the sign moves, not in the physical sense, though one imagines it fluttering slightly in a spring breeze, but in its emotional register. It stages the condition of being always almost invited. You may drive through, you may order, but only if the clock agrees. And the clock here is not a neutral mechanism. It is a gatekeeper, a scheduler of longing. In that way, the piece functions less as commercial signage than as minimalist performance art. Onkawara meets drive-through dramaturgy. Time, here, is sculpted into weekends and stripped of any myth of wholeness. What remains is conditional access, branded availability, and Helvetica's cool indifference to your needs. Thank you again for watching the podcast and supporting my work. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone else you think may enjoy it.